Hello, it's Miss G back again. I've got another story that I wrote today about that family of remarkable imaginary squirrels that we met. And this story is titled, The Explosive Rescue. What a night! We couldn't get to sleep because of the storm. There was thunder and lightning and more rain than I had ever seen in all my 9 squirrel years. Thank goodness my mom put lots of new leafy sticks in our summer nest this year and wove them tightly with some yarn scraps our human friends left us. We stayed dry, at least. The wind tossed us around and bent our tree until it groaned. Something near us got hit by lightning, and there was a blinding flash and sizzling sound, and then a loud crack. Finally, the rain eased off and the storm moved on. We heard 2 owls calling, and that's scary too. We never leave the nest at night. An owl could get us. The sun was just coming up over the treetops when a ragged, buzzing, whining noise shook our nest. I rubbed my paws over my eyes and nose and blinked sleepily. My brothers and sister were still fast asleep, and my mom's fluffy tail was curled around them. Cautiously, I moved out of the nest and headed down our tree to see what terrible thing was making that noise. It was a crew of humans, and they were sawing down a tree somewhere nearby. Just then, my little sister cut it out, woke up, and scrambled down the tree behind me. I nearly lost my grip when she screamed right in my ear. Oh, I was about to smack her one with my tail when I saw what she was hollering about and nearly screamed myself. Down below our tree, we could see a squirrel with 2 heads. That got us turned around and back into our nest in short order. Mom! Mama! Mom! I was yelling at the top of my lungs as I shook my mother's fluffy shoulder. She awakened right away and said, "What? Stop it, dear," in her slightly husky contralto squeak. She acted as if there was nothing the matter. I shouted, "There's a monster out there under our tree. It has 2 heads. Come quick!" Cut it out, squeaked miserably, and began to cry. The grinding, whining sound the human saw was making was even louder, and it made her cry harder. "Quickly, stop it, dear. You must say quickly," said my mom as she licked Cut It Out's cheek comfortingly. "Mom, who cares? I'm telling you, there's a monster with 2 heads outside our tree. Come outside and see now, please." My mom said, "Stop it, dear. There is no reason to take that tone with me. I am not mentally defective nor deaf." She stuck her beautiful, dignified, whiskery snout out of our nest and pulled it back inside with a sharp gasp. "See, I told you," I said. "A monster, right? Right?" By this time, my older brothers, Beat It and Knock It Off, were up and grumbling. Knock It Off had been out with his buddies until full dark, eating fermented crab apples, and he was having a hard time waking up. Beat It was fully alert, and in the absence of our father, he felt he should be in charge of our defense. "You stay in the nest," he told all of us as he warmed up. Yep! And did some practice karate chops with his special karate tail. "I'll handle this." With a guttural cry, he leaped out the entrance to the nest, and we heard him scramble down the tree. We held our breaths. We waited for what would happen next. We never could have imagined what would have happened next. Beat It laughed. He roared, he giggled, and then finally he called to us, "Hey, everybody, come take a look at the monster. It's Aunt Mabel." We crept to the entrance of the nest, and we could see it was true. It was our Aunt Mabel, and in the brightening daylight we could see that she was carrying one of our little cousins in her mouth. That was our monster with two heads. Cut It Out stopped crying, and we all laughed in relief. We stopped laughing when we saw the look in Aunt Mabel's jet black beady eye, and the way her paws trembled. She was holding one of my 4 little cousins by the scruff of his neck, and that's what made her look like a 2-headed monster in the dawning light. Mabel glanced left and right anxiously and seemed to be looking everywhere at once. What was she doing, carrying my little cousin around like that anyway? My mother rushed past us and down the tree. She leaped high over the wet grass and mud to where Mabel stood looking bewildered. "Mabel, my dear, whatever is the matter?" Mother squeaked in her elegant way. "Oh, Fluffy, thank God you're here," cried Mabel. She laid my little cousin down, and he began to cry because the grass was wet. My mom picked him up and held him. "What has happened to you, Mabel? You look quite unhinged," said my mom. Mabel didn't answer at first. We could all hear her squealing and grunting with fear, sorrow, and the sheer discomfort of wet fur and mud between her claws. "Mabel, this is your sister Fluffy talking. Calm down. Stop snuffling. Tell me what's wrong. Mabel, where are the rest of your kits? Are they all right?" "Mabel?" My mom shook Mabel rather hard just above the front haunch. Shocked, Mabel tried to stop blubbering. We couldn't hear much of what she was saying from the nest, but we did catch the words, "Lightning struck the tree, the broken branch, and humans sawing down our tree. Oh, don't know where the children and I will live." And what really got our attention was the words, "And Einar is gone." Einar is our uncle, Mabel's mate. He loves her and the kits, and we're all sure that he would never leave them on his own. That news got my mom squealing. "Oh no, Mabel, oh no." "Children," barked my mother in an urgent tone, "children, come down here and salute your Aunt Mabel and then run to her tree and get your 3 little cousins to safety. Now!" Knock It Off, Cut It Out, and I all hightailed it down their tree. When my mom says, "Now," she means it. We all sniffed noses with Aunt Mabel. It was hard to ignore her snuffling and the tears on her snout, but she is, after all, our aunt. We kissed our cousin Mop, who was pretty much as wet as a real mop. Then we dashed off to Mabel's tree to find her nest on the ground, and our other 3 cousins crying loudly. The nest, lying smashed to pieces on the ground, was surrounded by a group of humans. We stopped leaping and hid behind a nearby bush to hear what they were saying. "Probably abandoned," said the tall human with the big saw. "They might die if we don't take them to the Humane Society," said the short, stocky one who was loading branches onto the truck. "Who cares about a bunch of rodents?" said the thin man with the pointy nose who was holding the rope. "I could smack them with a shovel, put them out of their misery, or we could just leave them here. A dog will probably get them." "Oh no, the humans on the tree trimming crew think our cousins Nip, Tuck, and Hop are orphans, and they're going to do something horrible to them. What can we do to stop them?" Trying not to panic, I rack my brains. A plan begins to form in my mind. We have to create a diversion. We have to do something to distract the humans for just a few minutes so that we can rescue my cousins. What could lure humans away for long enough to let me and my brothers and sister take Nip, Tuck, and Hop to safety? What could make them leave the nest alone long enough for us to grab my baby cousins? There's no time to explain to my family, but I have it. The idea of the century.
You all stay here, I shout. I'll be back with some reinforcements.
Although it's not even fully daylight now, I know my remarkable human friend Charley will be up. He's always up early. In just a few heartbeats, I am outside his window calling to him.
Charley, get up! I need you! Please! Charley!
I am relieved to see my human friend's red hair and intelligent face in the window. He's really quite bright for a human. Stop it! What's the matter? Your fur's all wet and muddy said Charley. I broke in.
No time for that now, Charley. I need your petty fireworks and some matches right this minute, please.
My fireworks and matches, but to stop it, squirrels don't know how.
Now, Charley, please. It's a matter of life and death, and there isn't time to explain now. Please.
Okay, said Charley, but I'm going with you. In the twitch of a whisker, Charley had removed the screen and hopped out his window, barely avoiding falling into the thorny raspberry bushes underneath his window. We were across the lawn in another second and into the garage where Charley keeps his secret stash of fireworks. He has to keep a secret stash because a few weeks ago the police had been here to talk to Mommy. Charley had been seen lighting penny firecrackers, and the police said even those little ones are illegal. Mommy apologized and gave the police all of Charley's fireworks to destroy. She thought. That's what I mean about how smart Charley is. He had hidden more than half of his fireworks in a safe place. He has the instincts of a squirrel in many ways. Isn't he intelligent for a human? He stuffed 2 big bunches into his pockets along with some matches, and we were off.
Follow me!
I shouted as I dashed up the telephone pole in the backyard. Charley stood on the ground looking up as I began to run along the wire. His mouth was open.
Stop catching flies! Watch where I'm going! Meet me there! Run! This is an emergency!
I was out of breath now and panting heavily. I hoped he heard me. He must have heard me, because he began to crash through the buckthorn and goldenrod and honeysuckle that grows along the property line under the phone and electric wires. We passed the spot where the crew was still standing and arguing about what to do with my defenseless cousins. I could hear Aunt Mabel crying and my mom soothing her. Beat it and Knock It Off were still stationed behind the bush, alertly observing. Cut It Out was preparing for the successful rescue of Nip, Tuck, and Hop. She had found a red pine with low and spreading branches that made a dry place next to the trunk. She had gotten busy gathering dry pine needles to make beds for my cousins. The branches were so low that I could not have known she was there unless I had smelled her familiar scent as I dashed past. There was no time to explain my plan to my family now. I rushed down another telephone pole right next to the tree trimmer's work truck. It was parked across the yard from Mabel's ruined nest behind a small hill. I had barely jumped into the open window when Charley found me. He was sweating and panting and scratched. There were leaves in his hair. He was bruised slightly from stumbling through the thickets, but he was, as ever, ready for adventure and eager to light fireworks. What would make the best diversion? The loudest sound. If the work crew were distracted and came toward the truck for even a moment, my brothers and Mabel could scamper in and rescue the kits before the crew returned to the tree. Suddenly, I was hungry. Of course, I'd had no breakfast, but what a time to think of food. I told myself to concentrate on the problem at hand and forget my stomach, but it seemed to me I could smell something delicious inside that truck. Where was it coming from? Somebody on the crew had a shiny metal lunchbox sitting right next to me on the front seat. I was startled as I saw the reflection of my own sensitive nose right in front of my face. Peanut butter. Peanut butter. That was what I smelled. A favorite of squirrels everywhere, and I'm certainly no exception. The dreamy smell of creamy peanut butter was everywhere. I sighed with delight and suddenly snapped to my senses. This was an emergency, and here I am thinking about peanut butter in a tightly closed metal lunchbox. Aha! I was reminded of something I watched on my Human Friends TV just lately. Something about the force of an explosion in enclosed spaces. Oh yes, we watch your TVs from the yard sometimes. Didn't you know that? That's it! I squeaked aloud. What's what? Charley said excitedly. Charley, I want you to blow up the lunchbox. I mean, really blow it up, sky high. Lots of firecrackers, lots of noise, I said. That ought to get those humans over here. PDQ. Charley's eyes got really big. He looked overcome with a mixture of excitement and fear and surprise. Wow, was all he could say. In a second, Charley had flipped the two latches on the lunchbox and opened the top, intensifying the heady aroma of peanut butter. For a moment, my resolve weakened, and I thought regretfully of wasting all that precious, delightful food. And then I remembered the danger my cousins Nip and Tuck and Hop were in, and steeled myself for the coming eruption. The lunchbox also had a can of soda, an orange, and 3 cookies. Peanut butter cookies. This guy the lunchbox belonged to was a true appreciator of the finer things in life. Too bad. Charley had packed the lunchbox with about 24 small firecrackers, which he laid on top of the food. He struck a match and said, "When I light this, run fast." No worries there, Charley, I thought. The match caught and the flame held. His hand trembled slightly as he brought the small flame to the wick of the firecracker on top of the orange. The wick sizzled slightly and then lighted slowly. "Run, stop it," said Charley as he dashed away from the truck. I leaped onto the telephone pole and climbed up to the wire away from the mighty blast which surely would now take place. There was an instant's pause, and then a feeble pop. Oh no, I thought. Is that it? I could see Charley lying on the wet grass behind the small hill in the lawn. He raised his head and looked anxiously at the truck. Here there were 2 more pops, and then 3 more after that, and then the whole remaining bunch of firecrackers exploded all at once and blew the top off the lunchbox and out the window of the truck. Here came the work crew on the run to see what the noise was all about. My plan had worked. Feverishly, I ran back on the High Line and shouted to my family,
Aunt Mabel, knock it off! Beat it! Grab the kits and run! Quick!
I saw them run toward the downed nest and pick up my little cousins. They were carrying them to the pine tree where Cut It Out had prepared soft, dry beds for them. I turned to look at the truck just as the man with the pointy nose got squirted with soda from the perforated can. He was spluttering and swearing as he mopped his face with his shirt. The tall man had fragments of a peanut butter sandwich in his hair and was running his hand across his head disgustedly. The short, stocky man was dripping orange juice, and there were cookie crumbs all over his shirt. They were hopping mad. The yelling, carrying on they were doing was unbelievable. Of course, they had no idea what had really happened or who might be responsible. The whole plan was working perfectly, and it would have gone off without a hitch, except for the fact that Charley laughed loudly. I saw him in the grass behind the little hill trying to contain himself. He had his hand over his mouth. He was shaking silently. What finally did it was when a stray piece of orange rind that had lodged in a tree came down on the head of the man with the pointy nose, making a little orange cap just the same size as his bald spot. It looked so ridiculous that I chirred and clicked aloud. Oh, that's how a squirrel laughs. Hearing me laugh made Charley burst out laughing. In an instant, the men had started toward the little hill where Charley was hiding. I called to him,
"Here they come, Charley! Run!"
He ran, but not fast enough. The men had seen him. "Hey, kid, you with the red hair, come here!" they shouted. Charley kept running. He was about a block ahead of them when a squad car pulled up in front of the men on the crew. The officer was heavy and red-faced. Impatiently, he asked the men, "What's going on here? I had a report about some firecrackers. Aren't you a little old to be playing with firecrackers?" All at once and all at the same time, the men started to answer the officer. "Wasn't us, for Pete's sake? I was some kid with red hair. He blew up my lunchbox. We almost had him. He ran away." "Wait a minute. One at a time, please," said the officer, covering his ears. While the men on the crew explained what had happened, Nip, Tuck, and Hop were taken with their dry bedding to the secret tree where our nest is. Aunt Mabel had stopped sniffling and was prepared to nurse them and take a nice long nap with them. I was worried about Charley, who was sure to be caught if he kept running. Where was Charley? I didn't see him. Cautiously, I came down the telephone pole and skittered in the direction he had run. Sniffing all the way, his scent trail led down the block and stopped at the red pine tree where Cut It Out had gathered her bedding. Peering through the branches at the base of the tree, I could see Charley. He was holding Cut It Out on his outstretched hand, and they were talking earnestly.
"Charley, you have to stay here until they get tired of looking for you, and then you can sneak back into your house," said Cut It Out. Wise advice from such a little girl squirrel, I thought. Well, we learn early on how to hide from humans, though. It isn't hard to do, since they can barely see and don't seem to be able to smell at all. Charley looked relieved and happy with the plan, so I resolved to sit on a nearby branch and keep watch. Before long, the police officer and the 3 crewmen had come up over the little hill and were slogging through the wet grass and the mud in the yard. They were not happy. They were complaining bitterly about the mess in their truck and blaming each other for not being able to catch Charley. From where he sat with my sister, I knew he could see their leather boots and their sneakers
and shiny black shoes passed by. At last, they turned the corner and kept on going. Slowly, Charley emerged from under the red pine. He gently set Cut It Out on a nearby branch and gave her a quick kiss on the nose. "Thanks a lot," he said, smiling. Cut It Out chirred happily and headed for a secret tree.
"Hurry home, Charley! Hurry home, Charley!" she called.
Charley ran around to the back of the little yellow ranch house and slid a garden bench under his window. He hopped up on it, through the window, into his room. Quickly, he replaced the screen and settled down to think about the events of the morning. He couldn't help but chuckle when he thought of the man with the pointy nose wearing that ridiculous orange peel cap. All of a sudden, he felt tired. He pulled off his muddy, wet shorts and t-shirt and laid down on his bed, pulling the quilt up to cover his shoulders. He fell asleep almost instantly. He didn't hear Mommy open the door to his room, and he didn't hear her tell the policeman, "You see, it's just as I said, he's still asleep." Charley does have red hair, of course, but he couldn't have had anything to do with the incident in the truck this morning. As always, Mommy remarked to herself how innocent Charley looked as he slept. She reclosed the door softly as the policeman apologized. The end. Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon.